For someone whose entire career has been focused on joy, why a podcast on pain? Because these stories need to be told. A good phoenix rising out of the ashes story reminds us all that not only can we survive, we can thrive. And when we emerge, we're different. That's the alchemy of pain. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Alchemy of Pain. This is a podcast where we focus on pain points in people's lives and how they grew from them, what they learned through them, how they made it through, and we share their stories on the other side. And we've run the gamut from people with dire diagnoses to great losses in their lives. But then there's the more internal kinds of struggles that we face that are equally painful, just different. And I'm so intrigued by the conversation we're going to have today, because if you've ever felt the tension between your work life and hoping to fulfill your quote unquote calling in life, that's this existential struggle that I personally have faced. I'm excited to talk to my guest, Evans Duren, who is an author of a new book called Send Me, and he speaks very candidly about this tension. Evans, it's great to have you here today.
I'm excited to be here, Brenda. Thank you so much.
And this word tension, I think, you've made me think about this word more
Yeah.
since we met. And when did it first show up in your life?
I would say it was probably sophomore year in college. I remember I was in a car heading to pick up a fraternity brother. We were going to a national conference in Tennessee at Vanderbilt. And I was at a T-bone intersection talking with my father about what I wanted to do in school from studying and career. And I said, Dad, I really think I want to do Christian education, special education, something in ministry maybe. And my father said, well, I think you ought to do business. I think you need to study business. And I'm the oldest of four sons. I didn't really push back a whole lot. I said, well, Dad probably knows something I don't. And that's kind of where it started. And over the course of 18 years, I really wrestled with it. And there was a lot of tension between faith and work and what that meant and what I believed about being able to use your job and your day to day and on being on mission with God, right? I had this very discombobulated view of what was and what wasn't ministry and missions. But that's where it started. I will say, just real quick though, Dad and I are great. It was one of the best things he ever told me, and it's led to an amazing 20 years since. So,
For our audience, which is comprised of all types of people from all different belief systems, the essence here, and you are a Christian and unapologetically so, and I applaud that. Whatever you believe, good for you. But I think this struggle between doing what I was born to do
mm,
and doing what I do to make money can be something that many people of all different belief systems wrestle with.
yeah,
For me personally, my background involves church hurt, where I was serving God for many years, the most productive, supposedly most professionally important years of my life in a church, only to find out it was a cult. And then when I walked away from the church, you're left with, what do I do now?
mm,
How do I serve God now, since I don't want to be involved in a church? And this is another whole episode, but what you're saying is well, how did you resolve
yeah.
the
No, well,
tension?
yeah. First of all, I think you make a great point, right? I mean, it's what I've learned is not everybody's going to believe the same thing, and I do want to be unapologetic, but I also want to be gracious and understanding that everybody's in a different place where they are in their life. Um, So I think one thing you said about the tension is it's universal. That is truly universal, right? We're still human beings. We still have drives and goals and desires and things we want to do. And I don't think it's unique to anybody's faith necessarily or their life to say, hey, I really want to know what it is I'm called to do. Now, we may have a different opinion about calling and all that, but why am I here? What's the point of my life? What am I supposed to do? Because more than likely, we still have places that we pay rents, we pay mortgages, we have transportation, we have to eat food. We If you have children, they're going to school, they need clothes. So there's a lot of things. No matter how different we are from a faith based perspective, the reality is humanity is very, very similar in a lot of ways. So yes, absolutely, tension is the universal key there. I don't think it's unique to any one person or faith, but I think for me, what I really did is it was a lot of people leaned in. I mean, that's the big thing, Brenda. It was I struggled with it in my mind about faith and work. I wanted to be a pastor. Felt like God said, "No, son, I'm not calling you to be a pastor." And so, sales rep didn't sound like missionary. It didn't sound like church worker, church employee. It was sales rep, and I struggled with, so I'm selling things and I'm making money. Now what? Is the goal to make money? Is that the purpose? So really not fully understanding how those worlds come together really drove me crazy for about 18 to 20 years.
And you can beat yourself up
Yeah.
saying, gee, I'm a success, but I don't feel fulfilled because
Yeah.
clearly I should be doing something else if I'm going to fulfill my purpose.
Right. And I
And
think we all want to be there immediately. And that's the other thing you and I spoke about recently was I had a great friend and mentor, a guy named Daryl. Daryl said, Evans, and I was 21, 22 at the time. You don't have to boil the ocean by 30, son. Like, it's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out by 30. And I thought that was the worst advice I'd ever got. But he was right because I didn't figure it out by 30. I haven't figured it out by 40, and I probably won't ever fully figure it out. But that ability to go through my own personal journey in my time versus that deep, comparison is the robber of joy, right? If you look around and you see success and things, well, why didn't I achieve that at 25? Or why didn't I come up with this idea? Or why didn't I do that thing with my family? It robs you of the fact that we're all on our own path in our own timelines. And we say all the time, in God's timing, right? And so there's twists and turns and loop backs, and we get off one exit and come back on another part of the highway. But that's called the journey of life.
do you think that every person has a purpose?
I do. Yeah, I truly do. Absolutely do.
Do you think that purpose can change or if it stays the same and we just change in life?
That's
I know
that that's
we're going
that's a
deep here,
really
but
good question. No, so I'll answer it from two different perspectives, if that's okay, Brendan. I
please.
think from anybody who says, "Hey, I believe in God. I'm a Christian." I think Matthew 28:19, the Great Commission, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations." I do believe that there is this unifying mission, calling, however you want to say it, of the Christian life. Now that said, I don't think that it's any different. So for everybody, they say, "Hey, I have gift skills and talents. How do I use my gift skills and talents to go out and to accomplish that task that's put before me?" Let's be very clear. I did not live Matthew 28:19 for a long time. Right? That was not. Again, I thought you had to be a pastor or missionary. That's who he was talking with. But what I found was there's still people who need you to be of service, to be a leader, to be a helper, right? So I do think everybody has purpose. I talk with folks all the time. You've got a stay-at-home mom to a Fortune 15 CEO. There's purpose. Title doesn't necessarily create any of that. I know plenty of parents who have children, and their children become kind of that. What am I trying to do for that next generation? I know plenty of high-powered individuals with lots of money who have empty holes in their hearts because they lost their family. They thought the purpose was to make money, get wealthy, and be important, and now they've missed everything else that really ended up mattering in the end. So I do believe there's purpose. I do believe there's a point to life. Huge part of that is serving other people. I'm a massive fan of servant leadership and really leaning in and sharpening each other.
Isn't it so interesting that in seeking to get, we often feel empty?
Mm,
And when we seek to give. So, there was a day and it was a beautiful space and time before the rug pulled out from under me where I felt like I was serving God because I
mm,
was in a church and I had people in a congregation and I was able to uplift them. And then how do you reinvent yourself? And yet your gifts just pop up again. Like you can't help it. It's sort of like who you are is in your DNA. And I can't help but encourage people. And whether it's at the gym or the convenience store or on a podcast, I may not be in a pulpit, but I'm still finally, I think, settled with the fact that I'm living what I was created to do. And I think that if you just don't give up, you'll find it.
I think you hit the nail on the head. There's something about having hope and belief that trumps everything else, right? How many times do we love to hear the story, whether the movie, the book, the story, whatever it is? We get excited to watch that hero's journey, right? And we're hoping and we're praying and we're fingers crossed for the outcome. The guy gets the girl, the guy, the family wins, it stays together, whatever it may be, right? The team wins this championship, whatever it is. We want that amazing ending, right? And I think a lot of times it's hope and it's faith that brings you to that point. And there are people that lose hope along the way. And there's a lot of sad, tragic things that happen. But I think what's beautiful about life and beautiful about how God works is again, I go back to the fact that we're on this journey. Everybody's got a different speed, right? Everybody's on a different place. But what's amazing is God is faithful even when we're not. God continues forward. God's at where He's consistent. We are really good at being human beings that can be fair weather for all types of things, right? I'm very fair weather on my diet right now, for example. So so that's what I'm struggling with. But we can adjust and feel a certain way, right? We have a range of emotions. I think it's beautiful that we get to have different feelings and emotions, right, as we go through life, different experiences. But God is faithful through all of it. He doesn't change, and I think that's the beautiful part. That He is the commonality throughout the whole process. But I think we're allowed to go through that journey, Brenda. I really do. And like you said, you've got such an encourager's heart. You have a giant heart for people. You can't get rid of that, right? That is just a natural part of your DNA and who you are. And I love that. That's your unique fingerprint in your life. Just one of many things.
And when you stop to consider whomever you believe God to be, and I do want to be inclusive in this audience. I don't know the name you use
Okay.
to acknowledge the divine, but believing that it is benevolent,
Hmm.
believing that it is good, and believing that while you have breath, there is a purpose for you, for your
Yeah.
heart is still beating, and therefore don't give up. I think that's really the underlying theme of this podcast.
Yeah.
So, Evans, tell us about your book.
Yeah, so I started writing the book in November of 2022. I had a fiction story prepared, ready to go. I'd signed up with a group called Streamline Books to publish the book, and I had this whole idea of what we were going to do. And my wife looked at me about a week or two prior and said, "Hey, honey, if you ever decide to do this full time, why don't you write the story God's put in your heart? Like, if you were to speak in front of people on stage, what would you share? Like, what do you really feel passionate about in a nonfiction setting?" And of course, we've been married 18 years. She's amazing. And I said, "Honey, that's crazy, but you're right." So I went back to Alex and Will and I said, "Hey guys, I'd like to change up the first book." And I didn't really have a full understanding yet of what it would be. And so I'm sitting there, had surgery on my hand, and I'm kind of pecking at my keyboard a little bit for the first 2 weeks. We put up the Christmas tree, and I'm up at like 5 in the morning. I'm looking at the tree and I'm typing, and I started thinking about a chapter from a verse from Isaiah 6:8 in the Bible, where Isaiah sees God on the throne and he says, "Whom shall I send who will go for us?" And Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." And that's kind of where it started. My personal journey was, again, faith and work, the struggle between, if I'm not a pastor or missionary, can I still love on people and do things for the church and for the Lord as a salesman? And so I started writing the book and things started coming together. And that's the path we went down, is really understanding from a Christian's perspective God is sending us all the time, right? We have this mission field in
Mm,
front of us. And back to purpose, right? Back to going out and doing work. It's a shame that if God's given you gift, skills, and talents, are you not leveraging, right? What are you
mm,
doing? We have to be good stewards. We talk about stewardship and money, but it's amazing when you think about stewardship of your time, right?
mm,
So that's important. And my father in law passed away during the process of writing the book. And when he did, it changed a lot of how I see time, frankly. He was an incredible guy. He was part of my life for 23 years. I was a 17-year-old young man coming to his house, asking his daughter out. And he let me come in the house, and he never kicked me out, and never hit me with any blunt object or anything else. He was amazing. But that's what the book was. It's like, how do we understand our role in being on mission and what we do, and why does our work matter? Is our work valuable? Is it
Mm.
just to make a living? Is it just to get a title? Is it just so we can buy the fun stuff, or is there more to it to helping other people and being on mission?
Thank you for sharing that about your
Mm.
father-in-law because I know that that was a profound loss,
Yes, ma'am.
and it's another whole story. And I do find that death is a catalyst for life.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
It causes us to say, "Why am I still here?
Yeah.
And then what am I going to do with this gift?"
So, Brenda,
And
along that same line, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm so sorry.
no, do it. Do it. Do it.
So, along that same line, I'd been in sales for 18-ish years, almost 20 years. I'd grown $100 million as a contributor. We were making a good living. We were doing things. I gotten comfortable in understanding what the requirements were to do my job well. I loved my clients. This past or 2 days ago or yesterday, I actually went and saw some former clients for the first time since I left, just to hug their necks. They were part of my life for over a decade, this specific group. And so it was just great to go say hey to them. But going through that process and saying, okay, well, this has been amazing. How do I take the last 18 to 20 years for the next 18 to 20 years, right? So in Eddie's death, there's a moment at his funeral. We're in the visitation line, and this lady walks up and says to my wife, Jamie, I haven't seen you since you were this big. So she saw her obviously when she was an infant or a toddler, and it was amazing. 40 years later, she came to pay respects to our family about what Jamie's father had done through his work to impact her family. And so he would have been 29, 30-ish years old at that time. So to know that this man had an influence and impact on these other people as a young man in his work changed everything for me, right? And to see that, it was an incredible gift he gave through, like, and it's hard to say it this way because it doesn't sound the way I want it to say, but like, in his death, there was this gift of Evans. Like, I had an example. Does that make sense? I had someone I could look at and go, I never realized it. And it was like, man, he lived so big in places I didn't see because I didn't go to work with him, right? But my goodness, he left an impact and loved on people and didn't look for credit, didn't ask for anything. But that was a tremendous gift for me personally.
Truly a life lived well.
Yeah, 100%.
In my own experience, and I bet our audience can relate to this, a lot of my striving for success was because I was trying to prove something to myself,
Mm.
my
Yep.
own worth.
Yeah,
And I think through my series of losses, that sort of kicked that to the curb. And it was like, what's left?
yeah.
And what's left for me is a desire to love.
Mm.
Um, and I find that it's the most peaceful and pure place to come from. But I love the juxtaposition that that's not to preclude I can't be successful.
Right. Yeah.
It's almost like when I hit the mat and stopped trying to be successful, business was coming in abundance because it wasn't the point.
Right. Yeah, there's that pressing, right? And I even find that now when I press and I struggle and I strive, don't get me wrong, we have to work. My father used to always say, Evans, life is not a spectator sport, it's a participation sport. So I don't think we just sit around and say, oh, it'll all happen. So we have to be involved. But I know in my own personal life, when I press and I try to make everything happen in my own power, man, it goes real south real quick, right? But what you also said a minute, I wrote down, you were talking about the word prove. How many times in our lives, instead of trying to become who we're supposed to become and like who we've been built to become and created to be, are we trying to not be something or not be someone? Or are we trying to prove worth and value? And especially through our work, because how do we do that? We usually do it with title and dollar, right? So if we let that become proof of value, that kind of skews it. And I did this, maybe you did, Brenda. I don't know. I won't speak for anybody else, but I went down that path of, well, I don't want to be this, I don't want to be that. These people said I should be this person, so that's what I'm going to try to do instead of just saying, "Hey, I'm comfortable in my skin and becoming who God's called me to be." Right? Who was I born to be? Who's created to be? Right? What's that thing that motivates me and drives me to get up every day and go kick this world in the butt a little bit and have some fun and do some good work?
I love what you just said. Who was I born to be?
Hmm.
And just settling the fact that you were born to be
Yeah.
can solve a whole lot of
Right.
angst and hurt and pain
Yeah.
and the internal critic and any rejection. Because
Oof.
when you settle that you were born to be,
Yeah.
what other people think doesn't matter as much.
Right.
I was born to be something. You were born to be something. You were created for a purpose. And
Yes, ma'am.
the joy in the journey is figuring that out.
Well, and you said earlier too, and one thing I love about just having met you briefly recently and talking, you talked about, you had some church hurt, and we share some church hurt, but there's this part, this internal critic, and I mean, every time I talk with someone, right? Like we all kind of find this commonality of like we have this internal critic who says, you shouldn't have done this, you should say this, you missed this opportunity, whatever it is. And you go back to that, like if you just don't stop, what keeps you getting up and moving, right? Like you can do a Rocky quote, you can do anything you want here in this moment. It's like, what gets you back up on your feet and keep moving forward, trusting a process, believing there's something ahead that's greater, believing there's a purpose and there's a reason behind all the things that are happening, right? Because that's the other piece. I think it's easy to get into the middle of it and say, well, I don't understand why such and such is happening. And is it me? Is it something else? Or maybe you blame it on someone, right? What if it's just part of that refinement process? What if it's just that part of crushing it and refining it to become the diamond or the pearl, right? Like, what if it's really just a part of the way it's supposed to be? And maybe we don't understand it, but can we accept that this is how life is moving and we just continue to move forward, pushing and striving for excellence and to bring value and purpose to life?
You mean that God can work all things together for good?
Yeah, it's almost like that's right. We have a saying, it's almost like God knows what he's doing. So,
Well, and and it certainly hasn't been linear for me,
yeah.
because after my church hurt, and I will probably do an episode on that in
Okay.
the future, because I'm very transparent with
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
audience. They know all the bumps, the bruises, the failures, the flaws. They
Yes,
know it
ma'am.
all. And after that, I not only put church
Mm,
as a, oh, stay away from that place, but also God.
yeah.
And what the beautiful thing I found is that the divine, however you define the divine, is love, patient, kind, believes all things, bears all things, hopes all things. And this undergirding tether of love guided me through a wilderness
Yeah.
of, it's been 20 years.
Yeah.
And Evans, can you believe that just about 2 months ago, I found a little church, and for whatever reason, I'm walking to the farmer's market and I hear this little thing in my heart saying,
Yeah.
you should go check that place out. And I'm
Right.
thinking, what? I don't do church. I haven't done church in 20 years. I'm not
Yeah.
going there. And I walked in, and with probably 100
Yeah.
suitcases of baggage behind me, invisible.
Bring it on.
And yet I realize that I represent so many people who have been
Yeah.
hurt by church.
Oh man. And here's the thing: the church is we're human beings, right? Even and I think that's something we as a Western church need to continue to work on and discuss in honesty is that we're not perfect people, right? We're not. That's not it at all. It's not about perfection. Not for us. I want to be excellent. I want to try to obtain excellence in all things, right? Work as if working for the Lord. But the reality is this: you talked about it a minute ago, and I had a leader at an old company. He was one of the most amazing guys I ever worked for. We talked about success a lot, and we think this is linear progression. And he was like, "No, it's like this," and it curly cues back, and it's like it's just a mess, right? But that's our lives too, right? So, like you talk about bringing the baggage. Uh, I, I'll share a story with you from Tennessee. When we were Jamie and I were newlyweds, and we were trying to find a church. I went to a church one afternoon or one Sunday, and a lady came in wearing a Guns N' Roses T-shirt. All right, and I was appalled because I'm sitting here thinking like, you come to church in your Sunday best, etc. I've since changed my opinion on a lot of these things, but she walked in a Guns N' Roses T-shirt, and I'm a Guns N' Roses like I like Guns N' Roses music, most of it, but I still thought, why would you wear that to church? And I mean, I hope and pray she did not see my face. I hope and pray she has no clue that this ever happened. But I looked down at her like, what is she doing? Why didn't she dress up? Come to find out that she and her husband had lost everything, and she was literally wearing the clothes on her back. And I go, how in the world could I have done that and thought that and looked at her that way? She chose to come into a place that often looks very tidy, very buttoned up, but she came the way she was. And I think that's the gospel, right? Come as you are, and let Jesus do the work. And so I've never forgotten that, because you talk about baggage. Everybody's got something. And a lot of times we don't know what it is, right? People don't want to bring that stuff in and talk about it. But God knows what it is. But then you also hit another point too, Brenda, where I think when you talk about God being love, the way we can not have the same opinion about faith, and maybe we have different faith backgrounds and different cultures or different beliefs, I do think we are called to love. I think there is a sense of grace and mercy, and I think there's a sense of, hey, look, you talk about breath in your lungs. If you read Luke's account of the crucifixion, it's the only account of the crucifixion where you have the two thieves on the cross and the full conversation that's recorded, the most full conversation. One thief on the cross is saying, "Hey, if you're Jesus, you're the Son of God, get us down from here. Like, send down the angels." The other one's like, "Fool, don't you know we deserve this?" Right? And so, like, that's really, I look at it two things. One, at the end of the day, we're all a thief on the cross. Which one are we? Right? Like, which one are we? But two,
Mhm.
that guy had breath in his lungs, and until there was no breath in his lungs, there was work. Like that's the thing. He's on the cross, and Jesus says, "You'll be with me in paradise, right? You'll go to heaven." And I'm like, man, who am I to judge or tell somebody about their baggage, whether or not they can
Mhm.
be, you know what I'm saying? Like, how can I tell someone they can't be a part of a
Mhm.
church or come into fellowship with the Lord or fellowship with the Christian body? I don't know. Those thieves are on that cross. That guy didn't have time to get down and go be baptized. He didn't have time to go to Sunday school, read the Bible. Like, he was there in those final moments, but he had breath in his lungs until it was
Mhm.
gone. He had an opportunity to know Jesus. And that's so important. But I think that's the love, mercy, and grace that we had better do a better job of in this world than we do.
I had dinner with my beloved friends. Some of my best friends are Jewish,
Okay.
and we were talking the other night. And I'm always wanting to be very respectful
Mhm.
of everybody's belief system.
Mhm.
And the woman at the table said, "Jesus was amazing," and and
Yeah.
and I, it sort of made, I was like, "Phew, okay,"
Yeah.
you know, because whether you believe or not,
Right.
just the recounting of this man who walked the earth, even if you believe it or not, if you just read the stories, you'll learn. I
Right.
mean, let him without sin cast the first stone.
Mhm.
Boom, drop the mic. I mean, that alone is somebody I want to
Yep.
know more about.
Well, and I think you hit what you said was amazing. The wall came down, and it's like the fresh air came back in the room when she said that, right? So, like, there I took some classes in the seminary here in town, and I remember having a professor said, "Hey, once you go out, talk with somebody of a different background of faith, share the gospel, and listen to what they believe. You're not there to argue. You're not there to try to say you have to. Just learn how to have an honest, civil discussion with someone where you are challenged, and maybe you challenge them, and you both walk away with whatever it is, but have an
Mhm.
honest conversation." And I will never forget. I called a guy at work. It was a Muslim guy, and I said, "Hey, man, I want you to know I have an assignment, but you're not a project." I was like, "How do you say this, right? Like, how do I come across without being a jerk or sounding stupid?" And I said, "Hey, buddy, I just need your help. I'd love to learn more about what you believe and why, and share what I believe. And that's all we're doing." He said, "Are you interested in becoming a Muslim, Buddhist, or Hindu?" And I said, "No, sir." He goes, "Are you trying to convert me?" I said, "No, sir." He goes, "All right, great, let's talk." And it was some of the best conversations. Like, but like you just said, I remember like I'm holding on the last bit of oxygen, asking him, and then he says,
Mhm.
"Let's talk." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And, but then we had an
Yeah.
honest conversation, and we didn't walk away agreeing on everything. But it was beautiful to be able to discuss something, have a conversation, not yell, kick, and scream, and go, "Okay, now I'm able to tell you why I believe what I believe. You're able to tell me what you believe, and we keep going, right?"
We
And that's the
keep
beauty of it.
going.
Would I love him to believe what I believe? Yeah. Would he love me to believe what he believes? I'm sure he would. That's the other tension, right? We all think we're right, and we all want everybody to believe. I don't think we're all right. I think somebody, but I think there's some absolute truth. But the reality is who am I to who am I to force anyone into anything? First of all, but who am I also
That's
not to
that's like
share?
meeting someone and saying, "You will marry me."
Right,
I mean,
right.
come
I'm like,
on.
that's not, and we have a bad rap in the Christian community at times for, I call it beating people over the head with the Bible. I want to share the gospel with people. I love sharing the gospel with people. But there's a way to do it too. There's a way to build relationship and have a discussion and conversation to earn those opportunities to speak respectfully to one another, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and and again, that conversation, I will never forget the hours and hours he and I spent speaking, spent talking. It was really incredible to have that opportunity. I'm grateful for him to do that because he could have said no, right? But yeah, so everything you're saying, 1,000% love it, love it.
So when I did go back to that little church and I met with one of the pastor leaders, I'm like, look, I'm not going to be your easiest new visitor. I got questions.
Yeah,
And I will tell you, in full transparency, I am not 100% where I don't, I just, I'm
that's
still working
okay.
through some
That's
things,
but that's great.
but I trust that there is something that has been started
Yeah,
and it will be completed. And as long as I'm not fighting, as long as I am open hearted, and this is what I want to say to the audience too.
mm,
We're not trying to sell anything here.
no,
If you seek, you will find. I trust that.
mhm,
I absolutely trust that 100%. And the fact that there is purpose for your life, what a great takeaway from this
100%.
discussion. I mean, there is a scripture, and I do love the scriptures. Now, I may not be your card carrying, churchy person. I'm not, and I probably will never be, but I love the scriptures.
Yeah,
And there's one: the gifts and calling of God are
mhm,
without repentance, meaning there's gifts in your life, there's a calling on your life, and God, the divine source energy, does not change their mind about it.
mm,
You can go all over the place,
yeah,
but you're going all over the place right in the center of a divine, loving hand. That's my worldview. That's how I
gotcha.
believe the story is. And how do you serve people now as you have made peace with this tension between the secular and the sacred?
Yep.
How do you serve people now, and how can people work with you, Evans?
I definitely want to. First of all, I love that question. I'm excited to share it. Can I share one more thing though,
Please
Brenda?
do.
Okay, my grandfather's a farmer. Okay, and the thing that you just said, I love it. I asked him one time. I said, call him Poppy was how I called him as a child. So I call him Pop now. As a grown man, I'm not saying Poppy every time I see him, but I was the firstborn grandchild. I said, Pop, tell me what you love about farming. And one of the things he said is, Evans, I take a seed and I plant it in the ground. Okay, so they dig a hole, they put the seed in, they cover it up, they can water it, they can take care, they can do everything they want to do to try to nurture that ground. They can do fertilize the soil, whatever it is. But they trust that from the time they plant it, something's happening in that soil, right? That seed is starting to sprout and take form and transforming. There's a transformation process. They don't see it until it starts to rise through the soil, right? So they believe it's happening. And just because you may not see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And I think that's the other piece that we have to address is like sometimes we don't see the transformation happening. We see the baggage, we see the problems, we see those stares at us and those daggers we feel from people's eyeballs. And we feel this emptiness, loneliness, or I'm incapable of something, or I'm not good enough. But never doubt the transformation that's happening under the soil that you may not see. Because one day
Mhm.
something beautiful is grown, right? So I think I had to call that out because,
I
man, when you
love that
said that,
analogy.
you got me thinking about it.
Oh, it's so good though, because, I end every podcast with the whole, you are the caterpillar in the chrysalis, keep
Yep.
pressing
Yep.
because and so you may be that seed in the
Yeah.
ground, and that ground is the dark place, but something is taking root.
Love it.
Keep
Love it.
fertilizing, keep watering, tend to your garden, my
Yes.
friends.
Yes, ma'am.
Something's going to sprout up.
Yes, ma'am.
Spring is coming.
Love it. Love it. So as far as how I serve others today, I wrote the book. This is the book. It's called Send Me, Discovering Your Mission Through Work. People can reach out through my website, evansduren.com. The book's on Amazon. I also have special order copies that are very nice hardbacks and whatnot from the site. But I've gotten into consulting with organizations, 20 years in sales. What I've really found is a lot of people trying to figure out what is the message that I take for my business? How do I help others understand what I do? How do I differentiate? What am I actually doing and how do I match it up with my clients, right? I've worked with people who said, hey, we're trying to build a new offering within a portfolio. We're not known for this. How do we think about sales and what is it my customers really wanting from us? And I've had another ministry that we just started working with that says, hey, we do this thing, and a lot of people think it's this over here. How do we make sure they really understand what we're doing? So, a lot of consulting is starting to happen around the sales piece and the development for organizations. Public speaking, I've spoken recently in some leadership seminars, speaking with the church next week. I want to share the message and spread the message about faith and work and marketplace ministry. But I also am happy to talk in circles that maybe you don't bring a Bible and talk about it, right? Maybe there's a leadership seminar or conference or a group where says, "Hey, maybe we can't bring out the name of Jesus, but we can talk about principles of faith and really work through how to serve other people." So that's where we are right now. And we'll be launching a new program for coaching and some events, some retreats here in the fall. So evansduren.com. And love to connect with people on LinkedIn, Brenda. It's how you and I connected through a mutual friend.
Oh,
I love
absolutely.
connecting through LinkedIn.
And I'm so glad we connected. You are an immensely likable
I
person.
appreciate it.
And, people can always sense when someone's trying to sell something.
Yeah.
And I think that makes people not want to buy. But
20 years of watching it done the wrong way. I loved,
I
yeah, you had to find the right way to do it because too many people want something they don't want to give. So, yeah.
so I want to end with a word of encouragement to our audience for someone who is wrestling with, am I living my purpose? What would you say to that person?
First thing is, I would say is if you, I remember doing this myself. If you would take a personal inventory of your life, where you are, the gifts, the blessings, the hard parts, the struggles, it's amazing when we can think 100 things are happening to us. But if you just take a second to look at where you are and the blessings and the gifts and the opportunities you're in, right? They may see some bad things happening or some dire straits, but I'm willing to bet there's a lot more good than we recognize immediately, right? So I think there's this personal inventory that's always great. The second piece is to be willing to share and speak with someone about what it is you're wrestling with, right? I think a lot of people, especially men, I would say, don't we're not taught to be open to talk about what's happening between our ears. But I think it's big because between your ears and down to your heart, there's a lot going on a daily basis. And that third piece is don't stop trusting the process. Don't believe for 1 minute that it's not going to be better or could be better. Don't think that there's some end result that you'll never arrive to see. Um, I tell people all the time, don't let your past freeze you in your today and your future, right? And we see too much of that. So I would say just those three things and just keep pressing forward in faith.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's been overplayed and trite, but yet I feel led to remind the audience too that when you see the one set of footsteps in the sand, you're being carried.
Mm.
You're being carried. You will make it. Thank you for tuning into this edition of The Alchemy of Pain, and thank you, Evans, for your time.
Thank you, Brenda, for having me. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, everyone.